Okay, we've got a really fascinating stack of material here today. We're doing a deep dive into the New York Mafia, the Cosa Nostra.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to get past the usual Hollywood stuff, right? The goal here is to look at it like a business, a really ruthless, adaptable business. How do the five families actually operate? How do they make money?
And crucially, how do they keep going? How do they avoid getting caught, especially now in the 21st century?
Yeah.
That word adaptable is spot on. I mean, the research shows Cosa Nostra is always changing. It's like an amoeba, someone called it. Always shifting shape, finding new angles, new scams.
That's where the money stops.
The whole thing falls apart. Exactly. So our mission really is to understand that hidden structure, the machinery that lets this thing keep running.
Right. And that structure, the one we see today, it wasn't exactly formed peacefully. It came out of some pretty spectacular violence. We probably have to start there, right? With the Castellamarese War.
Definitely. You have to. That war, back in 1930, 1931, it basically blew up the old system. You had these old school Sicilian bosses, the mustache Petes, Joe Masseria, Salvatore Maranzano.
Very traditional.
Very. And they were up against the younger guys, more Americanized, like Lucky Luciano, Vito Genovese. These young Turks, they saw that all the constant, messy street violence. It was just drawing attention. Bad for business.
So Luciano basically stages a corporate takeover, but, mafia style.
Yeah, pretty much. He decides the old guard has to go, famously sets up the hit on Masseria, steps away to the restroom in a Coney Island restaurant. Boom, gunmen come in.
Classic.
And then just a few months later, he does the same to Maranzano, takes him out right in his office.
Wow. So end of an era.
Completely. That old model, the single all-powerful boss, done. Luciano then creates the commission. Think of it like a board of directors or maybe a Supreme Court for the mob.
The whole point being stability.
Exactly. To prevent those kinds of massive, self-destructive wars they'd just lived through. They realized, fighting each other constantly was just dumb. Bad for the bottom line.
And the commission wasn't just for show. It had real power. Settling disputes, things like that.
Oh, absolutely. Mediating arguments was key. But more than that, the commission had to okay major decisions, like who gets to be the next boss of a family and, critically, approving hits on any made guy, especially high-ranking ones.
So internal justice, but centralized.
Centralized and approved. Keeps things, somewhat orderly.
And that idea of control, it filters down through the families themselves. The structure is all about insulation, isn't it?
That's the absolute key to surviving, to avoiding detection. You've got the boss up top, then usually an underboss, maybe a consigliere, the advisor.
Right.
But the orders, the dirty work, that flows down through the capos, the captains who manage the soldiers on the street.
So the guy actually doing the crime, the one likely to get pinched,
is way down the chain, 3 or 4 steps removed from the boss. If the leadership is smart and keeps quiet, it's incredibly hard for law enforcement to connect the dots all the way back up.
Okay, so the structure is built to last, but it needs fuel, right? It needs cash. How are they actually making money now? Especially when some of the old rackets must be harder to run.
Well, some old reliables are still there. Loan sharking, gambling, they kind of go hand in hand.
Loan sharking, that feels pretty old school. People who can't get bank loans.
Exactly. Bad credit, maybe a criminal record. They borrow from the mob, but the interest, the VIG, it's sky high.
But isn't that super illegal? Doesn't that draw heat? It seems risky if you want to stay quiet.
It is risky, but the threat of violence is the collateral, you see. It makes it reliable income, even if it's high risk. And the profits get laundered fast. Gambling's changed, though.
How so?
Less backroom card games, more online stuff. Websites run through servers in like Costa Rica or somewhere else offshore. They still control the players, the network, but it's all digital, harder to trace directly.
Okay, that makes sense. But the sources we looked at pointed to something maybe less obvious, infiltration into legitimate businesses. The food industry came up a lot.
Oh yeah, that's huge right now. And it's subtle. It's not just strong-arming one restaurant. It's about controlling the supply chain.
How does that work?
Cosa Nostra sets up seemingly legitimate companies, vendors, selling essential stuff for restaurants. Pasta, sauce, olive oil, cheese, maybe linens, water delivery, imported goods from Italy.
Okay.
Then they go to restaurants, ones they own or ones they just lean on and basically say, you have to buy your supplies from our guy.
Oh, so the restaurant gets a normal-looking invoice, pays it.
But the prices are jacked up. And that extra profit, that skim, goes straight to the family. It looks clean on paper, but it's basically extortion disguised as commerce. They become this unnecessary, expensive middleman.
Clever. And construction, too, right? That's always been a classic area. Bid rigging might be harder now with government monitors.
It is harder, yeah. But labor racketeering is still alive and well, just maybe more targeted. Like that fiber optic scam we read about. That was pretty slick.
Tell me about that one.
They use their influence in certain unions, maybe electrical communications, and they force contractors on big projects to use specific materials like cabling or fiber optics sold by a mob-controlled shell company. At inflated prices, of course.
So forget competitive bidding. They dictate the supplier and the price.
Exactly. And another big thing now is debt collection within the industry. Say a construction company owes another one a lot of money. The mob steps in and says, we'll collect that for you.
Using muscle, presumably.
Right. The threat gets the debt paid. And then the mob takes a huge cut, sometimes like half, for their service. It looks like one business paying another, but the mob is taking this massive extortionate fee off the top.
Wow. And it's not just local rackets. You mentioned that Range Rover scam. That sounded wild. International stuff.
Yeah, that was pure arbitrage, really exploiting global markets. They'd get high-end Range Rovers here in the U.S., maybe using straw buyers, dodgy financing for, say, $120,000. Yeah.
And they'd fake the paperwork to get around export rules, ship them off to places like China where demand was crazy.
And sell them for
maybe $300,000-$400,000. Huge markup.
Yeah.
Pure profit, all illegal. Incredible. Okay, so before we get to the enforcement side of things, what rackets have they mostly lost? Counterfeiting, sex trade, insider trading.
Counterfeiting money is just too tough now. The tech in U.S. bills, watermarks, security threads, it's really advanced. The old prostitution rackets, the 1-800 number kind of thing, that mostly died out. And insider trading.
Too much heat from the feds.
Yeah, the SEC, Securities and Exchange Commission, they got really aggressive. They have resources. Local cops just don't. So the mob tends to stick to industries that are cash heavy and maybe easier to, obscure things in.
Makes sense. Okay, let's shift to the muscle, because none of this works without enforcement, without the threat of violence. Which brings us to Murder Incorporated.
Right. Murder, Inc., a fascinating piece of history. It was basically the enforcement arm, the security division for the whole national crime syndicate back in the 30s and 40s.
So they were busy. Estimates are like, 400 to 1,000 killings?
Yeah, huge numbers. And the key thing was, it was deliberately set up to be separate from the families, often using Jewish mobsters, not Italian-made men.
Why? For insulation again.
Exactly. A boss needs someone taken care of. They put in an order to murder Inc. The hit gets done, but the boss stays clean. Plausible deniability.
The key figures were Lepke Buchalter and Albert Anastasia.
That's right. Louis Lepke Buchalter was the overall head, and Anastasia, Albert Mad Hatter Anastasia, he was like the chief of operations. The Lord High Executioner, they called him.
And they ran it out of a candy store. Seriously.
Yeah. Rosie Gold's candy store in Brooklyn. They called it Midnight Roses because it was open all hours for business, taking orders for hits.
The stories about their methods are just chilling. Not just killing people, but sending messages.
Oh, absolutely. That Walter Sage killing is a perfect example. Guy was skimming from slot machines.
A bad idea.
Terrible idea. So they have his own friends set him up. They don't just shoot him. They stab him over and over with an ice pick, tie his body to a slot machine, get the message, and dump him in a lake.
Grim. And that line when the body eventually surfaced?
If this bummy got to be a doctor or he floats. Meaning they should have punctured the body cavity so gases wouldn't build up. It shows how cold, how clinical they were about it.
And the guy who dresses a woman.
Oh, happy man. Yeah. Two guys, Leroux and Siciliano, they refused a contract. So Mahan puts on a dress, heels, makeup, the whole deal to trick his way into their apartment and kill them. Just utterly ruthless and, frankly, bizarre methods sometimes.
So how did Murder, Inc. fall apart then, if it was so effective?
Informants. Always the Achilles heel. Despite all the layers of insulation, it started to unravel when one of their own main hitmen, Abe Kid Twist Relis, got arrested and decided to talk in 1940. Flipped, turned state's witness. Once someone on the inside starts naming names, especially someone who did the actual killing, all that careful structure starts to break down real fast.
Okay, so that breakdown, that vulnerability, it leads us right into maybe the most interesting part for today. The different styles of leadership we've seen, especially the split between secrecy and, spectacle.
Yeah, that's a huge theme in the later 20th century. You've got Carlo Gambino, the fox. He's the model of quiet power.
His whole philosophy was low profile, right? Be like the lion and the fox.
Exactly. The lion for strength, the fox for cunning, for avoiding traps. Gambino ran the most powerful family in the U.S., maybe the world, but he did it from the shadows. Kept himself almost invisible to the public, and more importantly, to law enforcement.
Didn't he only get arrested once, like way before he was boss?
That's right. Tax evasion, 1937. That was it. He understood the real enemy wasn't another family. It was the government. Discretion was survival.
And then the complete opposite, Joe Colombo, first American-born boss of his family, and he loved the limelight.
Totally different approach. Colombo went on TV talk shows. He started the Italian-American Civil Rights League, trying to use publicity and sort of activism as a shield, arguing that law enforcement was unfairly targeting Italians.
Bold move. Did it work?
Not really. I mean, it was innovative, but it drew so much attention. That high profile made him a target, not just for the feds, but internally, too.
That's how he ended up getting shot.
Yeah, shot and paralyzed at one of his own rallies in 1971. Part of an internal family war, likely fueled by the chaos his public profile was causing. The lesson seemed to be, stay out of the light.
Seems to be the strategy of the Genovese family, right?
Yeah.
The Ivy League of the Mafia. They're seen as the most powerful now, partly because they're the most secretive.
Absolutely. They learned from guys like Gambino. Their strength comes from discipline, from omerta, that code of silence. They are incredibly hard to infiltrate because they prioritize secrecy above almost everything else. They saw what happened to the loud ones.
Which inevitably brings us to John Gotti, the Teflon Don.
The ultimate example of the loud one, right? He loved the attention, the fancy suits, the swagger, constantly in the news. He was the polar opposite of Gambino.
And for a while, it seemed to work. He beat several cases. Teflon.
For a while. But that spectacle, that constant visibility, it made him target number one. And crucially, it happened just as the government was getting much better tools.
You mean like wiretaps, the Title III legislation in 68?
Exactly. The 1968 Crime Control Act, Title III, gave law enforcement the power to use sophisticated electronic surveillance. Once they could legally listen in on guys like Gotti, who talked a lot.
The game changed.
Completely. All that visibility meant the FBI was watching, listening, building their case. And the pressure on his crew was immense. Eventually, his own underboss, Sammy the Bull Gravano, flipped. Gotti went down because he was too loud, too visible, and Gravano gave them everything they needed.
So pulling it all together then, from the wars that formed the commission to the fall of Gotti, what's the main takeaway about how Cosa Nostra operates today?
I think the main takeaway is that amoeba idea we started with. Constant adaptation. They've professionalized in a way. They lost some old rackets like counterfeiting or maybe controlling the docks like they used to.
Right.
But they found new ones, exploiting legitimate business networks, food distribution, construction scams, online gambling, complex debt collection. Their survival now depends on being more like a business, maybe a shadier, more ruthless business, but still focused on profit and, crucially, staying low profile. The flashy gangster. That's a death sentence now. Visibility is liability.
That contrast is really stark, isn't it? The quiet guys like Gambino and the Genovese family endure, while the loud ones like Colombo and Gotti ultimately crash and burn. It really shows how government surveillance and enforcement changed the rules.
It absolutely did, which leads to a final thought, maybe something for you, the listener, to consider. If Carlo Gambino's quiet, disciplined, almost corporate style of management proved to be the most successful, the most sustainable model for organized crime, what modern criminal enterprises are using that same playbook today? Maybe in cyberspace or international finance, operating completely under the radar because they learned the lesson that John Gotti learned the hard way. Who are the quiet ones now?